Welcome to CEO with Sophie. Just a quick note from me. If you like what you hear, go ahead and join the CEO Club right now by hitting that subscribe button. Not only will you never miss an episode, but you'll also be helping us out more than you know. Thank you and enjoy. Today, we're excited to be joined by Joe Graham, the Chief Digital and Information Officer at Pharmacy to You, a pure play e commerce business that's truly disrupting the healthcare space. Jo recently stepped into this role where she's helping to drive the company's ambitious growth plans and sharpen its strategic focus on technology and innovation. Before joining Pharmacy to You, Jo held senior leadership roles as CDIO and CIO at iconic brands like GHD, Boohoo, and Morrisons. Earlier in her career, she spent time supplier side with Capita, following nearly 2 decades in financial services at HBOS and the Lloyds Banking Group. Her focus has consistently been on customer-facing technology, from ATMs to online banking and call centers, always delivering seamless 24/7 experiences. In this conversation, Jo shares not only her career journey, but also dives into important topics like what to do when you feel stuck in your career, why staying too long in a corporate environment might not always serve you, how to navigate the tougher, less glamorous side of leadership. It's an honest, inspiring chat packed with wisdom for anyone leading or aspiring to lead in today's fast-moving digital world. Let's dive in. Hi, Joe. Welcome to the podcast today.
Hi, Sophie.
It's so nice to have you. So appreciate you taking the time.
No worries.
So Joe and I met. We actually met a few years ago before I moved to New York. And I actually asked you some questions, and it was great to have a little bit of a soundboard. And that's something that for me was really useful at the time, was just asking people like their thoughts, what they thought about, taking a step abroad. So yeah, appreciate it. And from there, I was like, let's get you on. Let's get the conversation going and hear a little bit about your story. So let's dive into that. Let's get a little bit of background on you if we can.
Yeah, sure. So, Joe Graham, Chief Digital Information Officer at Pharmacy to You. Pharmacy to You is a UK-based business. We're quite unique in what we do. We have a business that basically engages with the National Health Service, which is, for those of you in the States, is probably an alien concept. But we have a government-based health service available for all, not means tested, and there when you need it. So we basically allow people to put their repeat prescriptions or their prescriptions through the NHS into us, and then we run what is basically a private delivery service. And we've also got the private prescriptions, which is those services that don't tend to be available on the NHS, like the medicated weight loss, erectile dysfunction, and whole hair loss, all those kind of things. And we also have a site that does over-the-counter medications as well as pet health. Yeah, so that's where I am. I've been there 4 months, loving it, lots to do, which is definitely where I get my energy from. And prior to that, I've worked at GHD, a hair straightener business for the guys on the phone who are wondering what GHD is. Boohoo Group, 13 brands in that by the time I left. Morrisons, which is UK-based supermarket. Lloyds Banking Group, Capita, Bupa, the list goes on. I'm very old. Very old.
Stop it. No, but some great companies there for sure. I mean, the question is, do you get discount on straighteners if you work for DHD? That's what I want to
You
know.
do. You get 50% off. Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah, I
And
ask
and all
everyone that.
all colleagues get the new products as they come out. So yeah, we're all and in staff sales. So everyone who works for GHD tends to have a rather lot of devices in their bathrooms.
Fantastic. That's what you need. Perfect. So obviously you've had some significant roles in tech leadership, right? And you've just touched upon some of the companies there, GHG, Boohoo, Morrisons. What would you say were some of the most pivotal moments in those roles that really helped you for this current position that you've just moved to?
I think it's the big piece for me, especially when I go into somewhere new, is you almost do your own due diligence around understanding the business, understanding the culture, understanding your team, understanding where the business is going, and what you as tech need to do to be ready for that. I'm a huge advocate of never being on the critical path if you could possibly avoid being so. So it's tended to be learning that when you land in an organization, how you don't assume you know the culture and don't assume you know what the business is going to need, but really listening and working it out from there. I tend to find the first thing that is always needed is a team, and have you got the people for where the business is going? So quite often you tend to land in an organization where they're in a state of maturity and they just need that bit of lift to get to the next level. So, but yeah, it's about listening and just understanding where they're at.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on, you mentioned critical path. So just to get a little bit more understanding around what you mean by that.
Yeah. So quite often in organizations, whatever is going on tends to be reliant on technology. And we have this bizarrely unfounded reputation for never delivering on time and for making things overcomplicated. So we're quite often on the critical path where everyone's waiting for tech and things are overrunning, or, we didn't quite understand what was needed at the outset of the project. So I'm quite keen that you get to be as proactive as possible. So you have a look at making sure you understand a roadmap, making sure you've got a strategy that really aligns to the business, and you're almost preempting where the business is going. And also, if you're doing a project, you try and anticipate how might that project dovetail with what is coming, so that you're almost on a journey rather than delivering disparate pieces of work. Yeah, horizon thinking and just trying to make sure you preempt what's going on.
Yeah. I don't think I've heard the term horizon thinking before. I like
I
it.
might have made maybe I've made it up. You can have it. You can share it.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll just trademark that one.
Yeah.
And from obviously your experience, working in some of these really big corporates, what's something that you've, I suppose, taken away from them? What would you say, not even just going into a new role, but what's something that you've learned that on your journey you've been like, I'm so glad I learned
I
this?
think there's probably a few things. I will be forever grateful for starting my career in financial services. The rigor, the governance, the approach you have to take when you're in banking, not just because you're looking after people's money, but also because it's heavily governed and regulated. So I remember back in the days where I had the ATM network as part of my remit. If you're doing a project that involves something to do with the ATMs back then, you used to have to let the equivalent of the FCA know what your maintenance window was going to be. And that would quite often be a 2-hour window. And you'd have to hit your delivery within that 2-hour window because you'd basically told the FCA you were only going to take your ATM network down for 2 hours. So heavily regulated, and reputationally it's people's money, so you can't get that wrong. And you've also got the whole threat around cyber. A huge amount of thought goes into banking systems, as you can imagine. So that was a great place to cut your teeth on how to do it right and with super scrutiny. And I think the other thing that big corporate like banking gives you is you have to learn how to navigate your way around organizations, and build that network, and really make sure that you really understand how a business operates to get things done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And obviously working in some of the businesses that you've been in recently then, do you feel that they're as fast paced as maybe a financial services business, or they don't have as much governance,
They
but
don't need,
yeah,
yeah. I mean,
exactly.
PTU does because of the clinical
Yeah.
aspects. So we
Mm.
we certainly have a lot of clinical governance. So interestingly, I would say the small and medium-sized organizations tend to be more fast-paced and agile because they don't have the big corporate structures. And I'm sure anybody who's listening who's worked in both will understand, the bigger the organization, sometimes the harder it is to get things done if you don't understand it. And the smaller organizations tend to be more fast paced because they're opportunistic. And
Mm.
Boohoo, we did some crazy acquisitions during COVID. The first one we did was Caramillan and Coast, and we delivered that in 8 weeks. So we got the technology platform live in 8 weeks because the businesses were going into administration and we didn't want them to go dark from an online perspective. So we had to be ready at the point the administrators were threatening to switch the online presence off and be ready to take it over. You know, that's fast. That's about as fast paced. Yeah, Boohoo was extremely opportunistic because that was very much the culture.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. I definitely bought some stuff from Boohoo, so
Yeah,
and it kind of
joggers
yeah, those
during
are
those
the days.
COVID times. Yeah, everyone was buying joggers.
Yeah, no, it's you know the business kind of exploded almost, didn't it? Over the few years, I think there's a few other businesses that were similar. So that's definitely a great experience. And obviously, you've done some amazing things. Did you have a plan? Like when you started your career, did you go, look, this is where I wanted to end up, or did that kind of no?
Yeah, no, not at all. I think I was lucky in that, again, I started off in what was the Halifax Building Society. It became HBOS and it became Lloyd's Banking Group. Um, and I was moving jobs probably every 12 to 18 months within the same organization. So able to take the opportunity and you know, almost went through those corporate grades every 12 to 18 months. And I worked in tech roles, I moved into business roles, and I came back into tech after 4 or 5 years in the business. And I think that gave me a really unique perspective, having worked in on kind of both sides of that business tech fence. And then it's really been about, I think, opportunity and knowing when it was right to move. And I like organizations where I can make a difference. I'm definitely powered by the energy I get from doing that. And I think the point at which I feel like it might have got a bit samey, or it's more a business as usual, is when I tend to get a bit bored and decide it's time to move. Yeah, and I'm also fortunate is quite often I'm not looking for opportunities, they tend to find me. That is, great position to be in, because people come along all the time, and every now and then there'll just be something that really piques your interest at the right time for when you were approached.
I definitely think the more senior you get, especially within technology, because obviously, I work within the space. It is around if an opportunity comes up, definitely look at it or just be like, what is that opportunity? Because there's not 101 like
No,
101 roles out there, unfortunately. But it's great if it can come to you. You just have to, run with it and take the opportunity. And
yeah,
touching
definitely.
upon some of the stuff you said there. So, obviously you're like, oh, if it goes BAU, I'm just going to move on. By the way, that's business as usual, just in case no one knows what that is. But if you feel like you've got to a point where you've delivered everything you need to, has there been like any situations that you've really felt stuck in an organization where you're like, I don't know if I want to stay, if I want to leave, or you don't know what you want to do based on, I suppose, the environment there?
Yeah, I think that's again, probably as you get more senior, so I don't want to be a COO or a CEO or an MD or anything else that my role might potentially move into. I'm definitely a technology leader, and that's my sweet spot, and that's what I enjoy doing. So if you take the view that you're doing the job that is that, then there's nowhere else to go in an organization. You have to get what you want and what you value out of the role you're doing and the team you're working with. So I think, if there are points where actually, am I still getting that from this organization? Have they changed their strategic direction? Yeah, there's been a few, where you kind of feel like, I don't feel like I'm having the impact here that I once had, or the strategic direction's changed, and no longer is tech the focus, or the things that I thought we were doing on our roadmap suddenly we're not. So I think there's definitely been a couple of examples of those where you just feel like, actually, they don't need me. They don't need me to be here doing this. And actually, I feel like I could be adding value somewhere else.
And what would you say are some of those things if someone's maybe feeling that way at the moment where they don't know whether they want to stay in a business? What are some things that you would say to think about in order to make your decision?
I think so. First of all, the grass is never greener. Like there's
Amen.
just a different. It's
Mm.
different a shade of green. If you're lucky. So I don't think you should ever knee jerk or just jump because you've had a bad day, or something hasn't gone your way, or you might have a personality clash with someone. I always remind my team, if they're dealing with a particularly tricky stakeholder at a point in time, it's like, guys, that's why we get paid to be here. Like, you don't get paid to go to the pub with your friends for a beer. So, there's a reason we get paid, and that's because they're not always, people that we choose to work with,
Hmm.
that we want to spend time with. So, there's a reason, and, they've been hard for their skills, you've been hard for yours. So that you absolutely need to make sure that you're not doing it on a whim, and it's not just a particular personality clash, or it's got to be around, I suppose, re-looking at what your career goals are. So why was I here in the first place? Why did I join this organization? Was it because the project that they offered me was something that was going to really build on my CV? If it was, have you or haven't you done enough on that project to really warrant moving? Have you completed it? What's it done in terms of building your CV? Secondly, is the people you're working with the issue, right? Is that down to the stresses and strains within a business or an environment at a particular time? Is it a personality clash? Is it you? Because let's face it, sometimes we all have bad days as well.
Yeah.
Um, maybe you were hungry before you went into that meeting or
Hmm.
something. Um,
Yeah.
so have a bit of a look in the mirror around whether you're part of that challenge as well, because that other person might be feeling the same. Is it that the organisation has just changed their strategic direction, and that might still be the reason to move, but businesses do change their strategic direction. If they're not performing as well, if a market's going a certain way,
Hmm.
if they need to invest in something different, all of those factors. And I think as long as you're balanced in, how you're feeling and what you're thinking, and accept that actually I might test the market just to see, but it doesn't mean I'm necessarily committing, because you don't actually have to commit to leave until you sign a contract with someone else. But yeah, I would just say, wherever possible, take the emotion out.
Yeah. That's hard though.
I
It's not
know it's
easy.
really hard, especially yeah, especially if you get yourself in a mindset. It's interesting actually, because I've never ever accepted a counter offer ever,
You
and
not?
I no, and I do think it's because once I've got myself in the mindset that I'm going, because I'm quite considered in the fact that I've put myself in that mindset, I've already emotionally left, I suppose. So I
Yeah.
think it is important to really think about, why your reasons for doing it. And if your reasons are sound and solid, then you've made the right decision, and you don't take a counter offer.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't think I ever have. I was very close
Uh,
to, but I'm similar to you. If I make a
yeah.
decision, like I stick to it. Like when I told you about New York and you were like, "Oh, are you going to do it?" And then I messaged you like, "I've done it." You were like, "Right, okay." Yeah. Like you
Yeah.
just have to. And I think also like you don't want to live with regrets, right? So if you
Uh,
say you're going to do something, just do it because at the end of the day,
yeah.
you can
Yeah.
always do something different. You
Yeah.
can always change. What's the worst that's going to happen? You
Yeah.
know?
There's not much in life that you can't wind back or unpick.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I do think, from my perspective, trying to think about obviously when I've kind of moved organizations, I think for me, a lot of it can be around the cultural, side of things. Do I feel like I've been very lucky and worked for some really good businesses where like I've felt
Uh,
like I was in a family almost, and you do have really hard days, and you do sometimes, have a few tiffs and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like you hug and make up. Whereas, if I don't have that in some organizations, then sometimes I question it. Or like you say, if it's, not giving you a step closer to your end goal as well, or if you feel like you've learned everything that you feel like you needed to learn in that particular role, those
uh,
are some things that, I've thought about when I have left organizations for whatever reason. So yeah, there's
yeah,
there's a lot to think about.
yeah, and I think it is around. So it's always good to have a plan, because
Mm,
then at least you're deviating from your plan. So even if you barely ever stick to it, you at least are making a conscious decision not to. And I do think there is something around, what is this organization, environment, project, whatever? What is it going to do to build my CV? because at the end of the day, your CV is what effectively moves you into that next role or that next career move or whatever. Um, and I suppose there is something around, is it building my CV? And that's the question to ask yourself. And I think if the answer is yes, amazingly so. Am I loving it? Probably not, but should I do it for another 6 months? That's the kind of the start position. And I think, the strength of your CV is or resume if we're
Resume,
in the
yeah.
States. So that is what and who you are
Hmm.
when you're applying for roles, because at that point they haven't actually met you. So it is your passport into, where you might go and your career.
Yeah. Something that I've definitely started to do over the past few years. I mean, I always have a plan and goals and all those things that, I think about in my head, but also when I'm looking at working for a business, I think about, okay, what do I want to get out of this? So before I even like accept a role, okay, what
Mm.
do I want to get out of this? What's the reason for coming in into this job? Is it a case of oh, it's going to give me, a financial increase, which can be the case. Okay, fantastic. Or is it gonna give me exposure to a P&L, which I want to learn about, or whatever it may be? Like, is it gonna give me that one thing that I don't necessarily have that I really want? So that's something that I've done over the past few years, and that's
Yeah.
really benefited me because then I go into a business with like obviously I'm thinking about the business and what I need to do for the business with my role, but also I'm thinking about, selfishly, but what do I need to get out of this and how can I make that happen as well as, whatever I need to do for that business at the time.
Yeah, and I don't even think that's selfishly, because there's something around reciprocity in that, isn't there? And if you both, it's win-win. If both parties feel like they're getting something out of the relationship, then that's win-win. And you'll work if you feel like there is something that is driving you, then the organization will ultimately value from that.
Yeah, I agree. And how much do you think, I mean, your own mindset comes into this? Do you feel like you can stop yourself from obviously leaving an organization? I know we've spoken about how if we make our mind up, we just do it. But
Yeah.
how can people, how does that affect other people, especially if they don't necessarily have that just yet?
I think if you're young in your career, then there's something around confidence. And there's nothing quite like testing your skill set in another organization. In terms of, it's probably one of the biggest development opportunities that you'll have. That said, you need to make sure that you're comfortable with the role you're going into and the management structure that you'll be part of. But I do think, you know, grads and people who might have come straight into a working environment and that are still there maybe 4 or 5 years later, I would be encouraging them to, even if it was to go on a secondment to do something else within their own organization, if it was big enough or something that just gives them that confidence that they've picked up enough skills and tools and ability that's transferable, because it is great to go and test yourself.
I like what you said around the testing piece. Go and test your skills and see, are you actually that good?
Yeah.
And hopefully you are. Yeah, put yourself out there. I think that's such a good point. And what do you think? Actually, your opinion. I'm curious now. Now that we've gotten to this topic, if someone had worked for one business for like 10, 15 years compared to someone who's worked for multiple different companies, but what do you think? I suppose I'm not gonna say, "Oh, if you were hiring, what would you choose?" Just in case, like, you are hiring and people are listening to this and then literally like, "Oh, I can't apply now." But yeah, what do you
Damn
think
it.
about that? I know.
So it's interesting because I did 18 years at the iterations that were the Halifax, the HBOS, and the Lloyds. They were all part of the same group. But yeah, I did a good 17, 18 years in financial services at the start of my career. So I think your CV has to show the different aspects of what you've done. So because you won't have been sat there for however long doing exactly the same thing. You will have progressed your career. So I think it's really important that you show how you've progressed your career. If you haven't progressed your career in that period of time, I think there's probably a different conversation to be had anyway. But yeah, I think as long as you show that you've taken opportunities as they've been presented to you, and that you've tested yourself in other ways, then yeah, I wouldn't necessarily dismiss a CV, but I do think there is value in fresh perspectives and fresh eyes. And I suppose one of the things I was quite committed to after I spent that long in one organization was always making sure I've got enough external benchmarks. Because if you are in the same organization with a lot of the same people, back in the day, so many of us were in that kind of Halifax, grown into other organizations. There's not many people, certainly in the north of England, where you don't land somewhere and meet somebody that you've worked with or that know people that you worked with previously. But we did operate in a bubble. We literally operated in a bubble. And I think there is something around making sure that you do have that extra, what is going on out there? Do you network enough? Have you got your finger on the pulse, not just in terms of technologies, but in practices, in ways of working, in what good looks like? Yeah, and I think it's easy to become insular if you don't do that.
Yeah. So interestingly, I'll kind of give everyone a little bit of an insight to my life, but I have gone back to a business I used to work for now. And it was, the opportunity came up and I jumped at it. Now that I'm based in New York, it was the right time. But actually, going away from the business for what, a year and a half or so was great. For me
Mm.
personally, it gave me, like you say, a fresh perspective. I was able to come in with new ideas. I think differently about some stuff now. I'm not, I suppose, in that bubble where everything was just, you know, the business and the way we worked. I'm now like, oh, okay, I've picked up this, and this, and I'm still seeing, now when I'm doing stuff, I'm seeing how different I think about things and how different I'm doing things, which is really interesting. So for me, I think it's great. I needed that kind of to step back, step into something new, learn, all these new,
Mm.
skills, and then I've come back, although it's a different format. It's, I'm in the US, I'm not in the UK, so that's completely different. But, there's still some elements that are the same. But for me personally, I don't think I really am the same person almost.
Yeah, I think, and it is because you went off and tested yourself, and yeah, and you build your toolkit,
Yeah.
and your toolkit goes with you wherever you go. But if your toolkit's only ever been populated, furnished by the same people in the same place, and it's etc., that might not be a bad thing, but it is going to be samey, and you're not going to necessarily have those new experiences that sometimes cause you just to think a bit differently. It's like traveling, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
We all love, everyone travels for different experiences. So it's applying the same logic.
Definitely put you outside of your comfort zone. See if you can sink or swim, and then yeah, go back into it. Yeah, it's interesting. I know a lot of people that have worked for the same businesses for quite a few years, obviously like you did. But where the businesses change or develop over time, you have acquisitions. The
Mm.
businesses do change, the cultures change as well. So actually, it is kind of like you're going to be changing throughout that because your skill set has to change as obviously you've got mergers and acquisitions or whatever it may be. So if you are working for a business that has changed over the years, then you will change and your toolkit will change. But if you feel that it is, very much the same old, then maybe, check something else out, get another perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So if you were in a position now, because obviously things have probably changed over the years, but if you were in a position now and you were feeling a little bit stuck, and I know recently you actually moved, so maybe this does relate to you, and you feel stuck at the moment, what would be, I suppose, the first thing that you would do? Would you go straight out there and look for a job, or would you speak to kind of your network and get advice?
I definitely reflect on what am I feeling this way. Is it is it a transitory thing, or is it something that actually I'm going to need to properly look at and address? If it is, then I think you do kind of soundboard your partner, your friends, your network, and just to see how they perceive what you're saying. And whether or not because the market also might not be right for it. I mean, that we don't tend to find loads of CIO roles kicking around. So, I've probably got over the years a couple of headhunters who've either placed me in roles or who I've kept in touch with, and they are very good at saying that the market is this, or we're not seeing much that's probably going to float your boat. But yeah, and or they'll say, yeah, there's loads, and they'll pop me on the radar, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's instant. So it could take months. So I think there's definitely an element of not leaving it so late that you become really frustrated, but equally making sure that you jump for the right things. But yeah, so I would definitely, but I think it's important when you're describing why you're leaving that you're doing so to somebody who knows you and who's really honest with you. So in my case, it's probably my other half, bless him, where he'll be like, "Oh, here we go again," and he'll be like, "There's no way you're gonna change your mind because what you're saying
Yeah,
is what you say when you've made your mind up, and that's not going to change." Or it sounds like you're a bit bored and you're a nightmare when you're bored. So again, if it's someone who really knows you, they will translate what you're saying into either yeah, what you're saying is actually, it sounds like it's the right time versus you're just having a bad day.
for sure. I think definitely soundboard of people around you. I mean, the amount of times, you have it, like say, you have a bad day, you go home and you're like, "Oh, I'm not doing this anymore." Then the next day you
Yeah.
wake up and you're like, "Oh, I've got so much to do today. I'm so excited."
Y-
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Take the
it can just be.
wins.
Yeah, it can just be a bad day. And, not every day is going to be perfect. I think you have to remember that. And, I know some people that maybe have kind of jumped a bit too much because maybe when things get a little bit tough, that's when they're like, oh, I'm
Mm,
not sure. But I do think, and I mentioned this actually in another episode around, those tough times is really what's going to build you. And if you can just push through it, that's where you're going to see that growth.
yeah. Oh, you learn loads. It's yeah, if you come out the other side, and I think especially as you start to lead teams, leading
Mm,
your teams through those times, and how you have to not just think about your own emotions, but how the team are looking at you to see, how you're showing up, and taking their read from you. That's again great for the toolkit, and to get feedback on how they might have felt through a process, or making sure you don't blink sometimes. That's all extremely useful in terms of building your resume and building your toolkit.
So diving into that a bit more actually around that leadership piece, and obviously when you're managing teams, especially through maybe some tougher times, or even just in general, because managing teams isn't exactly the easiest sometimes. What do you think are kind of the key things or the key strengths that maybe you have, or you think that a leader should have? What do you do in order to make it easier for yourself?
I think with my direct reports, I think they're all different, and I think acknowledging that they're different, so you need to lead them differently. So, I'll have different conversations with people. Like, no one to one is the same because of how they are and what they might need. And I think that's quite important to acknowledge. And that's on you to work out how to get the best out of them and what they need. I think there's so I think that's definitely one aspect. And I think there's generally, when you're leading a large team, I think it's important that you engage regularly. So we do and I've done this in a lot of roles, is it's only half hour once a week. The whole team is invited, and we chew the fat on whatever's going on across the team. Very informal. It's not mandatory. People can come if they want. Most people do come, which I was seen as a sign of success. But it's about giving the team the opportunity to come together and just be exposed to some of what's going on across the wider business. But I also think that gives you then the opportunity to bring a bit of yourself to work. I mean, my other half and I've got 4 children between us, and they're all in early careers. They're all in their first or second graduate jobs. So, for me, when I've got colleagues in my team who are at the same stage in their career as my children, I'm clearly going to be very interested in how we're looking after those early careers, and for them to feel like I'm not a big scary. boss lady, I'm like their mom, which is not 4 minutes to say I'm maternal in your my children say, God, don't do that. Mum." But yeah, I think there is something around just them seeing that you're a human being who might be, so I don't think there's anything wrong. And again, some people do, some people don't. But I do think there's a authenticity in bringing a bit of yourself to work,
Yeah, I agree. I
especially when
think
you're leading big teams.
yeah, yeah. I think showing that you're, a human being is like the biggest thing. And I think from my perspective, or even just from my experience, the more vulnerable I've been with my team, obviously to an extent, I'm not necessarily going to cry all the time in front of them, but the more vulnerable I've been, or the more open I've been, I've actually had a better result from them. If they see that I've been struggling or whatever it may be, they're like, "Oh, okay, cool. It's not just me." So that's
Uh,
worked quite well.
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
What do you think is the toughest part of being a leader?
Is there are decisions you have to make that are clearly never going to be popular. I haven't done it recently, but I have been embroiled in those big, awful redundancy programs that organizations sometimes go through, and had to lead on those. Outsourcing back in the day, again, so some of those really horrible, tricky things. Even sometimes exiting individuals. And at the time, for the individual, they may or may not have anticipated it. They may or may not think it's the best thing for them. But what is interesting is invariably they sometimes look back round and say that was the best thing that happened to me. But they're hard, and and I've done restructures, and yeah, it's quite a lonely place to be because you can't talk about it to anybody. There are processes to follow. You have to be extremely guarded and close in those times. So that's always tricky. And I think sometimes as well when you're teams, and maybe one of your direct reports is going through a tough time, not necessarily work, family challenges, bereavements, all those kind of things. It's I think it's you do become, you share in their pain. So that's sometimes it's like another family member, isn't it, going through something, depending on how long you've worked with them. But yeah. So yeah, there are definitely, but it tends to be, I suppose, what I've just described there is all the people aspects where you're impacting someone else's family or livelihood, or for the right business reasons, but that doesn't necessarily make it any easier.
And especially if you're empathetic and you care, and it is hard. I found it really difficult, and luckily enough I have a good support network that are at my level that I can speak with. And I think it's harder, obviously, maybe for someone like yourself. You might not be able to have these conversations like you say, so it is hard. So how do you manage that then? So obviously these are difficult times, so what do you do to kind of manage it and not let it, I suppose, get to you, or do you let it get to you?
I think that I think weirdly you become experienced at how to do them. So, and I think again, doing it with integrity and authenticity and acknowledging that you're impacting people's lives is quite important.
Mhm.
So I think it does get to you, but you also, I suppose, if you've done it previously, you'll get out the other side, and so will they, more importantly. And I think the other thing that I've done when I've had to do a couple of these exercises is offered people intros to my network, intros to maybe headhunters, support and help with CVs. So at least, don't feel that you can't be a human being as part of the process. And whilst that they may or may not take me up on it, it at least makes me feel that I've tried to, input something and give something to them that they may or may not find useful.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. If I have to do
Yeah,
anything like that, I'm like, "How can I help you? I can introduce you
yeah,
here," or, if you need references or whatever and obviously I work in recruitment, so it's slightly easier for me because this is my job, so I can help people quite easily. But and actually even people that, this is, maybe I'm giving away some tricks of the trade, but even when I work with people that, are, looking for jobs, and I don't necessarily have anything for them and they're in technology, for example, I'll help them as much as I can if it's not
mm,
within the space that I'm working in. I'm
yeah,
more than happy to help anyone and help them network, especially at the moment. I think we've seen quite a few kind of redundancies and layoffs over the past few years. So it's actually quite difficult. And there are a lot of people that have been out of work longer than maybe, well, definitely they would have been just after COVID or pre-COVID. So it is definitely a difficult time. So yeah, always help people and it'll come back around as well. So you've got to think
Yeah.
of it that way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the right thing to do, isn't it? It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, just be a good human. That's what I say.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, we have a closing tradition on this podcast. We have a question that we always ask people, and that is, what is one piece of advice you would give your younger self or your kids, actually?
Crikey. Oh, I don't know if they'd be the same thing, actually.
Oh, then I want to hear both.
think um I think my younger self. So I wish, maybe I don't wish, I don't know. And I'm probably saying this with the benefit of my resume as it is today, but I wish I'd maybe done some smaller private equity turnaround type businesses maybe earlier on in my career, just because of how much fun there is to be had when you're making a difference and you're bringing your experience. But then you wouldn't have necessarily had the experience that you could bring. But, I do wonder whether I should have dipped out of corporate a bit sooner, back to that, just go traveling for a bit and see what's out there. So I wish I'd done maybe some of that private equity, small and medium enterprise type piece sooner, just because they are great fun, they're more fast paced, and they tend to be far more agile in their approach. Yeah, so I think that would be it. And then my kids, I'd say, whatever you do, stay corporate, get your resume, get your FTSE 100. No, that's not true. They're all doing quite different things. So, but I do encourage them to just have a bit of a plan.
Okay.
Yeah, be it, you know, um, move at some point. They're doing very different things. But again, two of them are probably in organizations where they can move within their organization. And that is something I would definitely be encouraging, especially if there's opportunity to do something more globally. I've never worked abroad, so maybe that should have been what I should have told myself to go and do. But yeah, I would definitely be encouraging the kids to go and try things, do things, and either leverage their own organization or see what they can do off their own backs.
I like that. Pretty good ones. But I think,
Yeah.
it's from experience. You kind of learn and you go, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that.
Mm,
Um, Yeah, you never wanna have regrets, and
no.
that's something that, especially as I've got older, I'm just like, "I'm just gonna give it a go. Let me give it a go and see what happens." But it's like you say with your kids and, like, just move, go here,
Yeah.
experience it.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, you can always go home or, do something
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Although one of them, I think, has got designs on Australia, and I'm not sure how his mum feels about that.
Yeah, that's a little bit far, a little bit far.
Yeah.
Um,
No, he should. He should go do it. He should go do it.
yeah, you're like, "Please go do it."
But come home after.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this has been so good. I really appreciate it. It's nice to catch up. And like I say, you gave me some good advice when I was looking to head off. Part of your thing was like, just go do it. You're like, it's gonna be hard, Sophie. It's gonna be really hard, but just go do it.
Yeah.
So I remember that, and yeah, I've done it, and I'm still here. So that's always a good thing.
Excellent. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is. It is
perfect.
always.
Appreciate it, Joe. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you, Sophie. Take care.